Well, good morning. This is Pete Najarian, and this is The Take on a Monday after that long weekend that was wonderful with the Easter holiday, and we had the extra day off. But here we go again, and the markets are moving all over the place once again. When you looked last week, we thought we were starting to see, and I think we're seeing a little bit more of a contraction in terms of the amount of movement we're seeing in the marketplace. And I think that's why we're seeing volatility that's coming down as well. But you look at last week, and when I say it's come in, it's come in from dramatically large moves in the marketplace over the last week or so. The previous couple of weeks, we were working probably in a 1,500 point range or more. Now it seems like we've got, well, Friday, we were in about a 500 point range. On Wednesday, about an 800 point range. When I look back to Tuesday and Monday, 800, 1,000 points. Believe it or not, that's a contraction from where we had been moving previous to that. We've had days where we were up 2,000 points or down 1,800 points and some movement in between that. So certainly we're seeing a little bit of a contraction, but again, it's a minimal contraction. But that's why we're seeing the volatility index coming down the way it has. We are talking about the highs. We were looking at volatilities at 85 and holding even above that 75 level and closer to 80. Here we are once again on Thursday, not Friday, but on Thursday, we closed at 42. So it gives you a sense of just how much volatility has come in as we've watched the contraction of the movement, because we're still seeing violent moves one direction or another, but that violent move seems to be much more directional for that day. And so that's something I think that's bringing in part of this contraction that we're seeing. But again, finished in the low 40s. Now, the one thing that we had been watching very closely over the last week or so, I'd been bringing up the idea that the volumes had been coming down over the last week and a half, something like that. That was true. Thursday, however, big change. 34 million option contracts trading on Thursday. So very, very active going into the long weekend. Probably a lot of repositioning as the markets had gotten up and over in that 24,000 range in terms of the Dow, actually pulling back off of that, but still pretty impressive day on Thursday. So 10 million over the average volume for what we've been seeing. So that 34 million, that's a real number. Now we're still averaging about 28 million per day when we look at the year to date. But when you look at April, wow, after some of that, what we'd seen the previous week of average, and we talked 24 million, and all of a sudden you get a 34 million day, that's something that's pretty extraordinary. So that was something I think that's important. Will we continue to see some of those volumes moving in the direction that we've been seeing, which was just one day, but that huge day on Thursday? So what about volatility, not just in the market itself, but how about the volatility of oil? Now, last week, the interesting part of what we were seeing, and it definitely had an influence on the market day in and day out, but oil, what a volatile week. We started off near 28, pulled back to 24, returned back towards 27, only to close back towards 23. So oil had really had some dramatic moves. Obviously, it was in the news consistently, talking about Russia, talking about OPEC, talking about cutbacks, all the rest of that, and some of the movement that we were getting out of oil and the energy sector. But the one area that really stood out for us on Friday, no doubt about it, was the financials. And the financials have had some huge swings to the upside, some big dramatic swings to the downside. Well, Thursday we had a very large move to the upside. As a matter of fact, you look generally at the XLF, you're talking about a 5% move to the upside. That's pretty strong. And it was led by some of the biggies. And we had option paper in almost every one of these names at JP Morgan, Wells Fargo, Bank of America, Citi. And add in one of the unusual option actually that we brought up here on the take last week. We were looking at a company called Mr. Cooper. Now, how many folks had ever even heard of Mr. Cooper before? And yet that had a day where it actually catapulted and was up 16%. So gives you a good idea of just how strong some of the financials really were, at least last week. Now, what's leading us to the downside today? Because right now, as we speak, we were down about 300 in the early overnight markets, 400 points. You never know exactly, just because you're looking at those volumes, certainly not exactly anything close to what you see when we're actually fully open and everybody's trading. But down 400 points, we have rallied all the way back, got into positive territory. That's where we opened. Now we've been selling off ever since. Now, right now, as we speak, we're down about 560 points, so call it 2.5%. Now, what's really leading it? there are three really big categories that have been moving with the markets and we've been watching very closely. I just brought up how the financials had such a strong day on Thursday. Well, what's moving to the downside today? You look at the XLF, you look at the financials, look at the industrials, consumer discretionary, all of those are now down well over 3% across the board. So it really has been a very strong move and a very rapid move. We're only a little over, now we're in 90 minutes into the trading session, and we were in positive territory, and now here we are moving redder and more red as we speak, getting closer to being down 600 points. I'm looking at volatility. I talked about how we'd been ratcheting back on that as well. And we'd gotten away from those 70s and 80s numbers. We'd gotten a little more comfortable about a week or so ago. We were at the low 50s. We closed and traded most of last week in the middle to low 40s. Here we are once again. We were 42 when we closed. Here we are up trading closer to 45 right now in terms of the VIX. So definitely volatility coming in as that market's getting pushed to the downside. That's something we really got to watch very closely. Now, what names are really working right now, even in this market that's getting pushed to the downside? How about Amazon, which is really rapidly approaching some incredible levels for Amazon. And when you look at it, it makes a lot of sense because Amazon right now, they just announced 75,000 hirings that they're going to need to do to address this demand of everything that's being ordered over the internet. And obviously those that have a great presence there, they're probably seeing just as much of that big boost. But Amazon being the big dog, certainly we're looking at Amazon as it's moving to the upside once again and trading very close to the highs. Netflix is another one near the 52-week highs. Why? Everybody's at home. Everybody's streaming. We heard some of the numbers from Disney last week, but Netflix just continues to be a powerful force in the streaming world, whether you're talking about here at the US or globally. The international growth has been something we've been talking about more and more, and that's been one of the aspects where are we fairly saturated here in the US? Well, we might have felt like we were, but I'm sure if you go through the process of going back to late February and now, I would bet you that we are looking at Netflix seeing a little bit of a powerful move and maybe a few additions here in the US as well. What did we see today? I'm going to add this right into our unusual option activity. I like to give you one of those every single time. Netflix. Now, Netflix, this was a very large, this is a stock I just mentioned, near 52-week highs. Very, very close on those 52-week highs. Stock was trading about 380. They bought 5,000, somebody large, because this is a big dollar trade, bought 5,000 of the April 390 strike call. So just out of the money. Stock actually was trading 376, somewhere between 376 up to 383. So in the middle, I put it at about 380. In the middle of what they were paying about $3.50. Folks, that moved so quickly. That all happened in the first 45 minutes of trade today. That moved so quickly, those options are already trading in the $6 or more range. So gives you an idea of the speed of these markets. And we talk about velocity all the time. We talk about the velocity of these moves. We talk about the algos. We talk about the big moves in volatility itself. We talk also about how big the moves have been in oil. It doesn't sound as big when you're hearing 28 to 23 to 27, back down to 23. Those are large moves, folks. Those are big, huge, monstrous moves. Now, we've had this big move in the metals as well to the upside. A little bit of a pullback today in gold and silver, but it's going to be a very interesting day. I'll give you one last recap, and then we're going to go. And then I was going to be on the halftime today, stepped back, still working on a few things. So maybe I'll see you tomorrow on CNBC. Did re-up, but now we're down about 620. We got a VIX of a 45. We got the S&P and across the board about 2.5% down right now. Now, the one area that's had a little bit of power, and I just mentioned a couple of the reasons why, but the NASDAQ. The NASDAQ's definitely, once again, dislocated, hanging in there a little bit better. It's only off about 1.25% right now, while the others are off 2.5% or thereabouts in terms of the big major indexes. Folks, have a great day of trading. I'm Pete Najarian. This is the Market Rebellion. Don't miss the roundtable we're going to be doing today, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock Eastern. Roundtable once again at the Market Rebellion site. We got some great guests coming along as well. And a real quick shout out to my daughter Alexis, who today, it's her birthday, 26 years old today. Wonderful gift for my wife and myself. one of the greatest people you will ever meet. Beautiful on the outside and even more beautiful on the inside. A great young lady. Really, really proud of her. I got to tell you something. Happy birthday, Lexus. We love you.